So after that section, he goes from the 10th fret of the D string to the 10th fret of the G string, back to the 10th fret of the D string. Then he hits the 8th fret of the G string and slides down to the 7th fret of the G string. So that whole thing is. And right there, again, that's all pentatonic with the exception of sliding down to this note, which is the 9th. So after that section, after he slides down from the 8th fret to the 7th fret of the G string, he does another fourths interval from the 8th fret of the A string and the 8th fret of the D string. So then he slides down from the 6th fret to the 5th fret on the A string and hammers back on the 6th fret of the A string. So the whole thing is. And then after he hammers on from the 5th to the 6th on the A string, he plays the 7th fret of the G string and slides down to the 5th fret of the G string. So the whole thing. And then he does a little trill, the whole 5th to the 6th, back to the 5th on the G string, and pulls off to the 3rd fret. So again, you can think of that sort of going back to the G minor pentatonic. So. Again, this could also be thought of in the G minor pentatonic instead of C minor. And then that one note that was outside the C minor pentatonic scale would actually fit in the G minor pentatonic scale. And then that note there would just be, if you're playing it over a G, that would be your 5th. So again, there's multiple ways of thinking of this, and there's certain scales have a lot of notes in common. Again, C minor and G minor, very similar. I don't want to bore you with theory thoughts. I try and keep that to a minimum. But anyway, the whole lick so far is. Again, you're sliding from on the G string from this 5th fret, 6th fret, back to the 5th fret, pull off to the 3rd fret. And here he does kind of an interval thing again from the 5th fret of the D string to the 6th fret of the B string to the 3rd fret of the D string to the 4th fret of the B string. So it's. So the whole thing is. Then he slides up from that 4th fret B string to the 6th fret, and then he does the bluesy kind of thing again. And again, that's the 6th fret, 7th fret, 6th fret, 4th fret, all on the B string. And this could be thought of, again, in the C minor pentatonic thing, you're doing that whole from the 4th to the flat 5 to the 4 to the 3 to the minor 3rd. And then you just go down that pentatonic scale, 5th fret to the 3rd fret on the G string. Then he goes from the flat 5 to the 5th. So 4th to the 5th on the D string, and then the 3rd on the G string. So then he slides down from the 5th fret to the 3rd fret on the D string. Then he does that trill again from the 3 to the 4, back to the 3rd fret to the 1st fret. It's that whole, the same thing he did here. And this one's actually a little faster trill. So. slides up to that note again. I think that's what he does. Then he slides up from the first fret on the D string to the third fret of the D string, and then he hammers on one last note to that to the fifth fret on the D string, which is the fifth of the C chord, or if you go back to the G, it's the root. So the whole thing together is. Actually, before he does that, he does that fourths thing where he does that trill, goes back down, then he goes to the third fret of the A string, to the third fret of the D string, back down to the third fret of the A string, to the first fret of the D string, slides up to the third fret of the D string, and that's after that he holds the note for a second and then hammers on that G note. So the whole thing together from the very beginning is. So, one thing I want to talk about also is the picking. What he's doing with the picking. He's when he does that legato part, a lot of times what I do, I pick a lot of notes. When I do my legato things, I pick more notes than I should. So a lot of times I'll do this. So that whole part, I'll pick down on that first note, then I'll pick the second note and pull that off. But what he does and a lot of other legato players do, they pick one note and hammer on, pull off the whole section. So that goes. So he'll only do one pick per string. So, and what I do a lot of times, for better or worse, is I'll pick that first note, pull off, then I'll pick that note and pick the next note and then pull off. And it gets a different sound to it. I don't know if I like it or I hate it, but it definitely breaks up that. That's why his legato sounds a lot smoother, because he's not breaking it up with another pick note. So the less picking you do, the smoother the sound of the legato. So just be, take note of when you're picking, when you're not. Also, how hard you're hitting with different fingers. We've gone over this before, I think, in another lesson. If you do an exercise similar to this, you could hear the difference in tone. Certain notes sound a little heavier, but you want to try and get it so that. I'm sorry. You hear that first finger? My first finger is a little weaker, and so it's not as. You don't hear it as loud as the other notes. And that second finger too. And what you want to do, if you want a really smooth legato, is try and build that up so that every note sounds as loud as the one before it, or as soft, but equal dynamics.